I have a question for you, and that question is, how important is trust? And you would think trust is a significant importance in our lives, right? We won't buy that coffee from that specific vendor. We maybe not buy those headphones or a laptop or whatever we're buying. We want to ensure that there's trust, and we can trust something before we go maybe make a transactional component to that. So, and the same is true when we're talking about our public key infrastructure and different types of trust concepts that exist with our certificate authorities and digital certificates. And in this video, we're going to cover the different types of models that exist. And I hope you're going to enjoy this video. So let's discuss the couple of types of different CAs and how they're able to trust one another. So the very first form that we have is our single certificate authority. And this is basically where we've got a single root, and the root CA is usually the King Kong of the environment, and all our devices. So we've got all our devices down here, and I'll just put devices. They will communicate with our root server. So our root server will basically be the only one that's trusted in a single CA, like in this specific certificate authority, meaning those devices will trust certificates that are assigned or issued by that particular CA and nobody else. Now, if we have that CA or if any other CA in that environment, maybe we've got intermediaries, well, they wouldn't be trusted. So from a security point of view, it may seem, quite appealing because if we've got one person that they really enjoy and they're issuing the certificates, that could also be a bad thing as well because it's a single point of failure. So because our environments are quite complex sometimes and it's changing, particularly in these single domain or the single certificate authority domain, um, it could be too exposed to maybe all the communications that's going on. So in the event of something occurring to this single certificate authority, it will give up and basically causing that PKI infrastructure to collapse. So all the certificates become basically null and void, they become invalid, and all the entities in our environment, like our devices, our servers, our hosts, obviously will no longer be trusted, which is a really bad thing. So we don't want that to happen. So as we continue on, so that's our single certificate authority. I don't know why I did that, but I thought I was going to maybe mention something else. My brain said no. Let's move over to the hierarchical. Now I'm going to pause the video because I have an issue spelling hierarchical, and I don't want to sit here for 5 minutes trying to spell out hierarchical. So give me 1 second, and I'll be back. Okay, and that took me just a few tries to actually spell out hierarchical. I guess this is luckily that it's not an English exam. So hierarchical is basically a form of hierarchy, right? So it's similar to like how we have, in an organization, we've got the CEO, and then we've got, maybe the CFO, and then his team, and then we may have the COO. So think of this as sort of that level of hierarchy, right? So we've got a hierarchy associated with our certificates and the way they're distributed and issued through various CAs, right? So typically you have a common, I'm just going to put up here. So we've got our root CA, and this is specifically, I'm just going to highlight hierarchical because we are talking about the hierarchical component. So we'll have a root CA over here who will be obviously issuing and obviously be responsible for issuing all the certificates in our environment. And then you'll have your intermediary certificates underneath there. So you have your intermediary CAs. So we've got our root CA and then our intermediaries over here, intermediaries, and I'll just leave it as intermediary for short. Intermediary authorities, which are linked. Therefore, there's obviously trust that's built between them or across those intermediary certificate authorities and our root CA, which is a very, very good thing that we want to have because trust is great and it's weighted and it's more favorable. So should this happen, there's a form of trust that occurs between our intermediary section down here and then our root CA. Now, the other question that I've got here is sometimes it could be a little bit challenging, right? So let's just say that obviously it's a good thing that we've got our trust. So when these certificates get issued, obviously obviously the subjects. So we've got our leafs down here as well before I sort of continue on. So we've got our leaf, which obviously are subjects, which is where the certificates get assigned to, right? So from this point on, basically what happens is at this type of trust between the CA, the subjects, and the root, and obviously all the certs issued in this type of architecture, everything becomes trusted, right? So we have our root CA, intermediary CA, the leaf layer where the subjects are found typically, And this is a single point of failure if we don't realize it already, because if this CA is the one that's responsible, that's sending out or being responsible for all the certificates in the environment, if this is compromised, or if there's a if we're becoming the only CA issuing certificates, our peak hour can collapse, right? So that can be quite challenging. So to mitigate that, what we would do is we may want to put our CA, or the root CA in this case, offline, since a lot of those certificates are being handled by our intermediary certificate authorities down here, which is what we want. So for this case, we may turn our root CA offline. So it's still there, but it's offline. And then our intermediaries, as this intermediary CA and a bunch of these CAs down here, they're the ones that are going to be responsible for then obviously issuing out certificates. So then we've got our leaf layer of certificates down here. And then should there be any issues even at the leaf layer, well, then we can trace it back to that specific maybe intermediary from there on. So obviously back to the root. So that's a good thing, right? So we want to ensure that that is available in our environment. We want to ensure that there's user enablement, obviously the way the certificates are set up, the different policies that are assigned to them, and obviously which certificate is assigned by which certificate authority. So again, we can all trace that back to that intermediary CA and vice versa back up to the root CA, which is good. The final part here that I want to sort of mention, and I was going to cover it, is our cross domain. Let me just clean that up. We've got our cross level. And this is cross domain certification. And this is typically when we need to establish a CA or a relationship across the domain, right? So let's imagine that we want to buy out some company. So we own company one, and we want to buy or merge or acquire company two. And we may be in a certain industry. We have our own, certificate authority. Maybe they've got their own CA as well. I'll just put CA here. Well, sometimes it becomes quite challenging because one is we want to make sure that all our devices become trusted and then for them to communicate with each other, right? So we need to establish a cross certification relationship where this particular CA simply connects or establishes a relationship with our CA, and that's achieved by signing the public key of the other particular CA. And once that CA is signed, all certificates issued from the certificate authority in that case and the users will be acknowledged and as they emerge in our environment. So we can have a cross-domain level certification. So if we're acquiring a business, then we'll have to obviously merge in that certificate authority so all devices can be trusted. Now we've got trusted providers, and trusted providers help us continue our trustworthiness. And basically, as a trusted provider, I'm just going to put trusted provider. And trusted providers are all about authenticness, right? They're trustworthy, we trust them, we want to have that, validation and the validity of our environment. So basically, what trusted providers are basically a root CA which can be trusted within our organization, and their identity can be validated, right? Which is the important part. So it's important for those certs being signed in the environment to have a level of validation. So trusted providers basically a root CA, or certificates or certifications, I should say, or certificates, right, are linked with that specific root CA, become linked and trusted. So that is how it works in many environments, and environments where we may have or generating our own certificates and having their own public key infrastructure. It becomes really important to ensuring that the root CAs in that case are added to all the trusted providers without any additional errors of hosts, etc., across our infrastructure. So trusted providers are all about trustworthiness. We can prove our validations and prove who we are. Lastly, we can create a certificate profile within our organization. So I'll just put down here cert profile. And basically, cert profiles are all about, the different types of various devices and packaging them in a way where as users required to use particular services, it will be able to, request them for obviously the specific certificate. So in a lot of our modern infrastructure right now, we use a lot of devices, right? We've got maybe laptops, we've got tablets, we may have mobile phones, personal devices as well, which carry workload functions as well. So we can simply have different types of certificates for those devices to prove authentication, whether it's email or other services like VPN access. So I'll just put in here like things like email, maybe VPN, etc. Because it really depends on what we need it for. So we can package these different certificates up and allow the users to download them, install them on devices, and then carry out basically services as they require. So then those certs will be pre-installed on those devices, which are really handy. And you may have seen this already. You may have a VPN profile on your phone, you get a certificate, and then you have to install that on your, if you've got an iPhone or an Android, you'll go away and you'll have to install that certificate profile, and then that gives you certain functionality, right? So they're the three sort of different areas. We've spoken about trusted providers, how important they are. We've got certificate profiles in the environment, single CAs, hierarchical, and cross-domain. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As and always, see you all in the next video. Bye for now.